Camping promises peace, starry skies, crackling fires, and quiet woods. But when the sun drops and the forest wakes up, that peace can twist into pure dread. These three chilling tales prove the wild has a dark sense of humor, and it's not always friendly. Story number 1. Back in 2020, just as the world was shutting down, I found myself leaning into the quiet isolation that the pandemic forced on everyone. For me, the woods were an escape. I drove out to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, hoping for solitude and healing after a rough year. You see, in 2019, I made a mistake that ruined my professional reputation and put me on the receiving end of relentless harassment. Strangers would text me from random numbers, sometimes threatening me. For months, I lived under a cloud of paranoia. By the time I set up camp beside a creek in Colorado, I thought that nightmare was finally behind me. The setting was beautiful. Thin snow crunching beneath my boots, the creek still flowing despite the cold, and the forest completely silent. I set up my tent, cooked sausages, and settled in with a book. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. That calmness shattered the moment my phone buzzed. A new text message, then another, then several more, all from a Connecticut number I didn't recognize. "How's the camping going, buddy?" "It's beautiful out here." "I see why you picked this spot." My chest tightened. Whoever was on the other end wasn't just guessing. They were here. I grabbed my pistol from my bag and sat frozen, waiting. Hours crawled by as I tried distracting myself with YouTube videos, the glow of the fire slowly fading outside. Then came the unmistakable crunch of footsteps in the snow, slow, deliberate, circling the tent. A flash of light hit the fabric. A camera? A flashlight? Moments later, my phone chimed again. This time, it was a photo of my tent, accompanied by the words, "Have a good night's sleep." Panic turned into raw adrenaline. I unzipped the tent and fired 2 rounds into the air. The footsteps sprinted away. Whoever it was hadn't expected me to be armed. The rest of the night stretched on endlessly, but there were no more texts and no more footsteps. In the morning light, it was as if nothing had happened, except for the lingering dread. Nearly 5 years later, I haven't heard from them again. But the thought that someone tracked me, followed me, and stood just outside my tent, that still keeps me up at night. Story number 2. Every October, my family had a tradition. We'd pack up our bags and head to my Uncle Jim's property in northern Michigan. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress for family gatherings. The place sprawled across 4 acres of forest and fields with a massive home that could hold all of us cousins, siblings, and parents without anyone stepping on each other's toes. One year, my cousins and I decided it was time to prove ourselves. No more hiding inside while the adults sat around drinking. We wanted our own adventure. Our brilliant idea? To camp overnight in the woods, just us boys, no grown-ups. Our dads, already a few beers in, thought it was hilarious and probably saw it as a rite of passage. They helped us lug a tent into a clearing just beyond the property line, a mossy patch Uncle Jim called Deer Beds. By the time the tent was up and our sleeping bags laid out, it felt like the start of something epic. That night, after the grown-ups headed back, we clustered inside the tent. Flashlights sat propped up in the corners, casting shaky beams of light as we played Uno. The woods outside were deathly still, so quiet you could hear someone's stomach growl. Then it came. A scream. It ripped through the silence, high-pitched and sharp like a woman in distress. We froze. My heart hammered in my chest, and my youngest cousin Joe looked ready to cry. Trying to keep everyone calm, I whispered what I'd once read. Foxes sometimes scream, and it can sound disturbingly human. The explanation held for about 2 minutes. The scream came again, louder, closer. This time, it didn't sound like an animal. We snapped off the flashlights, plunging the tent into pitch black. Sitting there in silence, we whispered nervously, straining our ears for any sound. Nobody dared to run for the house. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to move. And then, the footsteps. Heavy, fast, pounding across the leaves, closing in. They charged right at the tent. Another scream ripped through the clearing, so close it rattled the thin nylon walls. Suddenly, the tent began to shake violently, jerking, clawing, like someone was trying to rip it apart. We screamed back, some of us in terror, others shouting nonsense as if yelling would scare it off. Adrenaline finally kicked in. I yanked the zipper open and bolted, my flashlight beam bouncing crazily over the trees. One by one, the others followed, sprinting as fast as their legs could carry them. The forest erupted with our screams as we tore through the darkness, tripping over roots and branches, desperate to reach the safety of the house. Our parents were already outside when we stumbled onto the property, faces pale with shock. But the detail that turned my blood cold? My sister and girl cousins were inside, asleep in bed. Whoever was out there screaming and shaking our tent wasn't family. Our dads grabbed rifles and stormed into the woods. They searched for over an hour but came back with nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. The next day, we packed up the tent in daylight and none of us ever dared to camp in those woods again. Even years later, whenever we returned for family trips, none of us wanted to play outside after dark. And still, the question haunts me. Who or what was out there in the trees that night, screaming like a woman and shaking our tent? Story number 3. 2 years ago, my dad and I went camping in the deep countryside. The first night was perfect. Other families around, laughter drifting between campsites, firelight flickering everywhere. It was everything you'd hope for in a camping trip. The second night, however, we were told we were the only ones in the park. At first, the idea of having the whole place to ourselves seemed like a dream. By dusk, it felt more like a curse. The forest seemed endless and wrong, like it stretched farther than it should. Even my dad whispered, "Doesn't this feel like a dream?" We tried to ignore it, kept the fire going, roasted marshmallows, even laughed over beers, but the unease grew thicker as night fell. Then came the sound. A bang, like a tree crashing down. It came from near the river, close but not too close. We swept our flashlights toward the sound. Nothing. Minutes later, another bang. Louder, farther away, then a third. This time, closer again. It was moving, circling. When the fourth boom echoed barely 20 yards away, fear finally overtook us. We dumped the last of the firewood onto the flames and scrambled into the tent. My dad grabbed the only weapon we had, a small knife. That's when we heard it. A low, vibrating hum that wasn't just sound, but sensation. It filled our chests, tightening our lungs, making it hard to breathe. Then came another sound, guttural and alien, unlike any animal I've ever heard. My dad later described what he saw outside the tent as a wall of darkness. We stayed frozen in silence until, inexplicably, everything just stopped. The next thing I remember is waking up. My dad was beside me, still clutching the knife. Both of our phones fully charged the night before were dead. The fire had burned to ash as though hours had passed. Stepping outside, everything felt wrong, as if the forest itself wanted us gone. We stayed in silence until daylight, packed up quickly, and left without looking back. To this day, neither of us can explain what happened. We didn't dream it, because we both felt the same terror, heard the same sounds, and saw the same emptiness in that darkness. Whether it was something natural or something far beyond it, I'll never know. What I do know is that we've never been camping since. And that wraps up tonight's creepy camping tales. If you enjoyed these stories, smash that like button, drop a comment with your scariest camping experience, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales every week. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep your fires burning, your tent zipped, and your phones fully charged. You never know who might be watching.